Mike Griffiths is a longtime friend and collaborator in the Agile space. Now, there's so many of us in the Agile space, and we've been doing this for a long time, but Mike is unique, and he's unique in that Mike brings a body of experience from the PMI community as a project manager himself, as a PMP, and an advocate for both project managers and PMI members, as well as Agilists. And I don't know how many of those there are out there. I'm certainly one of them. And so one of the things that we found in common is this joint interest in and passion and burden for those folks out in the PMI community, project managers, program managers, and pulling them together with Agilists. So we don't see them as different, even though they're in some quarters, there's a little bit of, I think, an unnecessary animosity, you know, all those project managers, all those Agilists. And I've hoped that we've gone beyond that, especially since the Project Management Institute has acquired Disciplined Agile and is perpetuating and forwarding Disciplined Agile itself. So Mike, as you'll find out, is originally from the UK and now lives in Canada, and has this international perspective and a huge following all over the world, because he is the author of many, many books, including the key guides to the PMI ACP exam, the Agile Certified Practitioner, put out by the renowned RMC publications, right, from Rita Mulcahy and all such. So Mike has sort of assumed the mantle of leadership in that community from Rita Mulcahy. So welcome, Mike. Please take it away. Thanks for being here.
Thanks very much, Sanjeev, and thanks everybody for attending. I'm just going to get my screen sharing going here, and then we'll get started. Thanks very much for this opportunity to talk about some ideas from a new book that's coming out end of this month electronically and next month in paper form, called Beyond Agile. And what I'd like to chat about today, you know, in just 20 minutes, there's only a few topics I can cover. So today, I'll just be talking about these ideas. We'll look at success and failures, some root cause analysis of those success and failures we see on teams, and then drawing from that some obvious or not really obvious observations. There's more than just one here. It's obvious when you see it or when people do it, but to other people, it may not seem that obvious. And then we'll wrap up with this idea of more and less balance. So a little bit about my background. I think what's relevant here is, you know, I've been working with Agile teams for quite a long time now. And while 2021 marks the 20th anniversary for the Agile Manifesto, you know, the Agile approaches like Scrum and XP and DSDM started in the 1990s, in the early 1990s. Really, and that's what I want to chat about first here, because it leads us into this story or this journey that led to Beyond Agile. So back in the early 90s, I was working for a company in England called Data Sciences. They were later acquired by IBM, but I was part of a group developing DSDM, and we were influenced by a couple of great pioneers. One of them was James Martin, another ex-IBM engineer. He had his own company by then, and he was the person that came up with RAD, or Rapid Application Development. And it was all about these, you know, prototyping, quick build feedback cycles, getting information about, you know, feedback and information about what we're building early on. And the other influence was a lady called Enid Mumford. And she did a lot of work on what's called participatory design. In other words, let's get the users involved in the design of their own systems. Let's not design for them. Let's bring them into the process and, you know, get their input, because they're going to be a lot happier about what we build. And it's also going to be a better environment for the teams as well, working directly with the users as opposed to working, say, from a specification. So you can see that these two things kind of are at the core of Agile, really. We have these, you know, short cycles, we have build, you know, learn feedback cycles and learning coming out of that. And we have customer involvement. And also, how do we increase job satisfaction by putting the workers, giving them a lot more say? You know, it was the elements of empowerment that we were drawing from. So these two streams kind of led us down into DSDM, and we've been executing it successfully with a couple of clients. And my big break was when they said, hey, Mike, we want you to spin up and run DSDM for this brand new client. And this user design has been going so well. Why don't you take it further? Why don't you get the customer involved in architecture as well? And so that's what I did. I worked with a brand new client, and we set up these experiments, and we got the customer in our architecture sessions. So we did these experiments, and it was a disaster. User involvement in architecture was a failure for us. You know, the user suggested unfeasible technical choices. They argued against established architectural norms. They wanted to shortcut all of the design. You know, and I thought I was going to be in a whole bunch of trouble, basically. But the people I work with, were totally fine. They said, okay, well, that was a good experiment. So user involvement in screen designs, that's good. We're going to keep that one. But user involvement in architecture, yeah, not so good. We're not going to recommend that one. And for me, it was the first instance of kind of, drinking our own champagne, in that we were evolving DSDM itself through experimentation. We were adding things, we were taking away things that didn't work. And, you know, the approaches were evolving. They weren't sacrosanct, right? We need to experiment. And the 2001 Snowbird meeting that led to the publication of the Agile Manifesto, you know, I think was good and bad. I think it was 90% good. You know, it spread the word about Agile, and until then, every new client was a major sales exercise in getting them to allow us to try this approach. But I think it also kind of formalized and froze some of the evolution that was happening within the methods. You know, they still evolve, of course. We get a new Scrum guide every year or so, but many people seem reluctant to try experimenting themselves kind of outside of this. And so for the last 27 years, I've been working with Agile teams. And for the last 10 in particular, I've been trying to figure out, you know, what do the very best teams do, the most successful ones, compared to all those others, because I help lots and not all of them succeed, to be honest. And because I'm so deeply invested in this, you know, that was a little disturbing. So what I found was that the best teams used Agile, but they didn't really emphasize it. You know, they might be doing things from other domains. They might be learning all about the business and the industry one day or 1 week. Other things that we'll be chatting about, Agile myopia. Maybe Agile isn't the solution. Maybe for some things, the best solution is from plan driven or leadership or emotional intelligence or some industry specific thing. And a lot of organizations fell foul of what I call buffet syndrome, that when we present them with a whole bunch of options and process, that we perhaps tend to take a little bit too much. And then we bear the cost of having to carry all that stuff. So we'll explore some of these. Yeah, the root cause analysis. So of the projects I looked at, you know, looking at the best teams, I've been lucky to work with a few really great teams, and 4 are featured in the book that stand out, including one team that rescued a delayed over budget program and went on to win a PMI Project of the Year award and earn millions of dollars in tax credits for innovation. Working with that team, we dropped a lot more processes than we adopted. You know, we were doing pretty standard Scrum, and then we dropped the iterations and went with continuous pull. We dropped retrospectives. You know, why would we wait for 2 weeks to talk about improvements or try an experiment? When we dropped daily stand-ups, I was a bit nervous. It's like, geez, don't you guys need to be communicating? And they said, well, we're communicating all the time. And it's very similar to, I think, Alistair Coburn's kind of shoe-ha-ree, in that, you know, first of all, you follow the rules, and then you begin to pull rules and approaches from different areas. You combine things. And the restage is you start to let go, right? And you do what you need to do without a lot of conscious thought about the actual guidance itself. And the struggling teams I looked at, many of them were looking for a single process to follow. Well, just tell me how I'm supposed to do this so we can go execute that, right? And they spent a significant amount of time on training and following that process. And they were very reluctant to experiment and to drop things from there too. So this is, and when I started talking to people about this, about the successful teams, you know, this was the, to some people it's very obvious, and to other people it didn't seem obvious at all. That, and there's a lot in the book. I'm just going to focus on these first three here. You know, there are no best practices. We're in the, if you look at the Cynefin framework, best practices work in that simple domain where there's cause and effect correlation. We're more in the complex and complicated. And so there is no single approach that's universally best, right? Perhaps today we need to learn all about the business so that we can be a credible, you know, someone to trust and talk about options to them. The agile myopia I mentioned before, you know, not all problems have an agile solution. Maybe what we need is something from leadership or emotional intelligence that agile taps into, but only superficially. You know, there's so much in emotional intelligence about how we make decisions with teams and how we resolve conflict that's super useful, but we don't really get exposed to that much just by looking at the regular agile guidance. And then the last one, yeah, this buffet syndrome, that all process has weight, but knowledge is weightless. So we should learn as much as we can about all these other approaches, but then be super selective about what we actually choose to employ. So this little cartoon, I think, reflects some of that, right? There's a lot of people looking for the simple answer, and the simple answer is quite often wrong. We don't need a pamphlet or a flyer. We probably need a roadmap so that we can make our own decisions about which way to go when we're at an important junction on our projects or products. So that was kind of one concept, but I definitely think Agile is the best starting place that we have. And so, you know, this model with Agile as the trunk of a tree emphasizes its core purpose. And sometimes we might head up, do a little bit of plan-driven stuff, and that's what the stakeholder needs, or some industry-specific work, or draw more from leadership and emotional intelligence. And so this kind of tree model was a basis for a model that I go through in the Beyond Agile book. So down at the bottom here, we've got sort of Lean and Agile as our trunk. But you know what, there may be some plan-driven stuff that we do, or leadership and emotional intelligence. And the model is supposed to be populated ourselves with all of that industry-specific elements that we need to do to be successful on a project. I'm going to come back to this model a little bit more and talk about the elements there, but let's talk about process weight and removing weight, because this is often, I think, overlooked. So here we got a team in a raft, and they're not all paddling in the same direction. So the net vector of this team is hopefully towards a project goal, but it's not guaranteed, right? And we know this, and it's why we do a lot of work to try and get aligned teams. You know, we have vision statements, we have product owners telling us what needs to be built, kickoff meetings, XP has a metaphor, we have ideas like simple design, definition of done, and they all help align us towards that project goal that we're trying to get to. But that goal is typically always moving away from us. And that's what I'm calling done drift. You know, where we're trying to get to isn't static. Not only does it kind of move around as requirements change, but it's always moving away as the competition is launching better products, as technology is, you know, needs to be upgraded, as our customers become more demanding or expect more features. And unfortunately, a lot of the projects I've seen over the last 27 years, they never catch up with that done drift because they just aren't going fast enough to actually get there. And so the project is unsuccessful. If we can get alignment, then of course we're going to be going much faster towards that target. But we need to do everything we can to get that maximum speed, because the sooner you reach it, the sooner we can declare success. It's better to have a project that executes for 6 months, delivers what's required, than I think a bigger one that executes for a year and then eventually gets to what was required. And some of the things that slow us down are when we have too much focus on process, and even if that's agile process. So here in this top image, we've got, out of 100% of effort on our team, if we're spending 5% too much on ceremonies, for instance, perhaps doing sprint planning when we know very well what needs to be worked on next, maybe it's not sprint planning, but that's just an example. Then that's 5% that will never get back towards trying to complete the project and deliver. And your organization, may have a whole bunch of other things you need to do, time recording, mandatory meetings, other things. It could be more like 15% of your time or 30% of your time isn't spent on trying to get to that goal for our project or product. So how do we strip away excess process? And so the benefits of subtracting process and making our teams, lighter so they can go faster and getting to this done thing. And one company that do this really well is Lotus, the car company. Lotus Engineering consults with an awful lot of vehicle manufacturers, and it's all about, reducing weight. Colin Chapman, the founder, was quoted as saying, simplify and then add lightness. And you do that by taking stuff away. And another quote of his is, adding power makes you go faster on the straights, but subtracting weight makes you go faster everywhere. Through the corners, less time braking, you accelerate sooner and just move quicker. And it's the same with teams too. If we can be more nimble, more agile, then we're more likely to get to that destination. And so another concept is that, process has weight, but knowledge is weightless. So it's totally fine to learn as much as we can about all these different approaches, and that's what we encourage, but then be super selective about what you take with you on that journey of the project, because you're going to have to carry the weight of all of that, and it's going to slow you down trying to catch up with getting to done. So it's about increasing knowledge, but decreasing process. And so this sort of triangle diagram talks about, expanding the toolbox, honing our skills, becoming agnostic. So we learn as much as we can about all the different approaches out there. If it's lean, if it's agile, even if it's plan driven, I don't mind. If it's useful, then let's learn about it. Let's practice it locally and then become agnostic. I don't care where it comes from. If it's part of SAFe, if it's part of Nexus, if it's Scrum, Discipline Agile, if it's going to work for us, great, then we should consider it. So have an agnostic approach, but then be super selective on focusing on our goal, right? This is what the best teams seem to do. They remove all the excess process. They're always asking at retrospective, okay, so what can we drop? What isn't adding enough value anymore to warrant its time and our investment? And so sort of this mindset can be added in or layered into our regular sort of development process. So yes, we do our dev and our ops, but we should always be looking at questioning, do we still need this? Or is it really worth the time that we're spending on it? Or is there something better that we can be doing? Just in the same vein, I was reading just last week, The Register is this UK IT magazine online, and it talks about how psychology boffins talk about people tend to add elements to a design rather than take things away. And digging behind the tabloid article was this Nature paper, and people systematically overlook subtractive changes, which is complicated. They gave some nice simple examples. They gave this Lego model to a bunch of people and said, the roof is kind of unstable. Can you stabilize it? And people added 3 more blocks so that the roof was kind of symmetrical and now stable, rather than removing 1 block to make it stable. And they asked another set of people, okay, make this roof stable, it costs you 30 cents per block to add blocks, but it's free to remove blocks. And once again, people just added 3 more blocks as opposed to removing that 1 block. And I think it's kind of psychological that we think, well, gee, it must have been there for a reason. I don't want to kind of undo that, but I can think of a solution. If I just add these 3 more blocks, then we should be good. So coming back to that beyond Agile model, we have this dotted red line, which is like a lens that's always trying to constrict. So it's showing us the bounds of the recommended approaches here. And if you were to drag these project sliders, drag team size, so it was a larger group, or project criticality, so it was larger, then this lens would expand, but only then. So I got a little animation of it here. So dragging the team size, you see that the dotted red line, we're doing more plan-driven stuff as we get to very large teams. Same with project criticality, right? We need more rigor, process rigor, but requirements uncertainty, well, gee, just add more agile and lean stuff. This is the solution for uncertainty. So it can give us training and artifact guidance. And here we're only looking at 3 sliders. It's a simple model, but if we switch to a more complex one, then we've got team member inexperience. The less experience, then perhaps some more guidance is required. Or if people are happy with lean techniques, great, we can obviously do more on the lean side. Maybe you've got a very complicated environment and you want to add in criteria such as what's the client's view about change? Maybe they need more regular guidance. Or are we in a highly regulated industry? Maybe there's a lot of industry guidance that's required. And so the model sort of grows and shrinks. But the emphasis is that it always starts off at the kind of minimum, right? And it sets the stage that we're playing in. And then there's a spotlight that kind of highlights what we're working on. Maybe yesterday it was, chartering. Today it could be risk management, and tomorrow, who knows, it could be conflict resolution. But these are all different techniques that we might focus on, but the model is kind of always restraining you. And so this is one of the ideas that's explored in the book. It's a thinking tool, that's all. I like the quote, all models are wrong, but some are useful. The idea of this tool is to give you a way of looking at all the things that we could adopt on a project, right? It's not just Agile. There are some good plan-driven things. There's an awful lot of good stuff in leadership and emotional intelligence. And, let's not forget our industry-specific things that we have to do. So kind of wrap up, I still believe Agile is the best place we've got to start any type of project or product. All of the successful teams I looked at used Agile sort of most of the time, kind of, right? But they did a lot of other stuff as well. And they weren't really that vocal about Agile. They did it anyway. They weren't sort of the most Puritan about it, I guess. But they did go fast by jettisoning a lot of process. And, I think it's always smart to learn as much as we can so we can expand our tools with leadership, emotional intelligence, industry experience, and always be sort of chasing that done, which is moving away from us. So that's a lot of information, but I wanted to get some of the core ideas of the book across. So thanks for listening.